Lately, the hobby has been mourning the loss of 5 Hall of Famers in just the past 2 months. We've all seen what happens after. Sales of these player cards go crazy in the time immediately after. Here's a 66 PSA 8 Joe Morgan that sold for nearly $1,200 on the day he died. It had been selling in the $175 range before his death. But I was curious about the longer-term impact that a player's death has on a card's value. I decided to use eBay sales of the 1968 set to answer that question, since 4 of the 5 recent Hall of Fame deaths are in that set, and I have a lot of eBay sales data for their PSA 8 cards going back several years. Here's the average sale price of Tom Seaver's PSA 8 card for 2020, up until his death on August 31st. A month and a half later, his card is selling for an average of 64% more, almost $360. I'd like to use the average sale price of a card on eBay for consistency's sake, since it captures the highs and lows of the market. I do realize that there is a range of prices for a card, and that price usually depends on the centering, but using the average allows me to draw meaningful conclusions between similar cards. I was shocked to see this Bob Gibson card sell for $453 with clean sweep auctions, just 2 weeks after Gibson's death on October 2nd. Before then, it was a $116 card. Now, a couple weeks later, it's selling for an average of 47% more on eBay. Lou Brock died on September 6th, and about 6 weeks later, his PSA 8 card is selling for about 33% more. But this is a little deceiving, since at the time of this recording, there hasn't been a sale on eBay since September 14th. This brought up an important lesson for me in the research. Some of these cards have pretty low inventory, and that can impact prices. The Brock card has a pop at about 50% that of the Gibson card, at only $292. 1968 is a very popular set with collectors, as there are 253 basic sets in the PSA set registry. That tells me that most of the 68 Brock 8s are similar to the one I own, cemented into a collection and not going anywhere for years, no matter how much the price spikes. This low inventory is a factor that's going to raise prices even further when the demand is so high. Here's another example of that. Joe Morgan died on October 12th, but when I recorded this video a week later, there had not yet been a single sale of the 68 PSA 8. Of course, that hasn't stopped people like Dean's cards from trying. They are attempting to get 4.5 times the previous average of $45 for this example. While these 4 case studies might be helpful, it could be a little too soon to know the long-term impact on prices. So let's look next at 3 Hall of Fame players from the 1968 set who have passed in the last 2 years. Willie McCovey died about 2 years ago. 6 months after his death, his PSA 8 card was selling for 15.5% more than it had been in the 9 months previously. In 2020, the card is up 14% over last year. But how do you tease out how much of the increase is the result of his passing, and how much is just because vintage cards as a whole have been on the rise? Cards priced similar to McCovey's, Denny McLain and Willie Stargell, have had very similar levels of growth in 2022. A month after Frank Robinson died in February 2019, his PSA 8 was selling for 48% more. 6 months after his death, it had dropped a bit by about 11%. In this year, 2020, the card has gone up 52% over 2019, now selling for about $90. Al Kaline died earlier this year on April 6th. In the 6 months after he died, his PSA 8 was selling for 25% more than it had been in the 6 months before his death. I decided to next go back about 10 years to the cards of Ernie Banks and Harmon Killebrew. Banks died in early 2015, and 6 months later, his PSA 8 was selling for about 10% more than it had been before. Today, the card is selling for double what it sold for in 2015. 7 months after his death in 2011, Killebrew's 8 was selling for about 11% more than it was previously. But after a year, the card was back down to where it was before his death. The increase was minimal and short-lived. There's certainly some room to do more research on this phenomena, but I came away with a few important lessons. First, it's clear that a player's death causes an immediate increase in card prices, somewhere in the 25 to 60% range, or even more. But that's not really a surprise to any of us. What is a surprise is that overall these prices do not seem to drop down that much over time. In the cases of McCovey, Robinson, and K-Line, the prices do not drop back to where they were before their deaths. And I doubt that they will. It seems like the prices rise to a new plateau and then stay there as a new baseline. I would fully expect prices on Seaver, Gibson, Brock, and Morgan to do the same. Secondly, star power matters. It wasn't a coincidence that I shared the increases of Seaver, Gibson, and Brock in that order. That's the same order they fall in the set in terms of the price of their PSA 8 cards. Seaver is valued about twice as much as Gibson, who is twice as much as Brock. Perhaps that explains why Frank Robinson had a bigger increase than Willie McCovey. This research has been a little surprising to me because I just assumed that prices drop back down, at least at some point after a player's death. I don't think that's the case. It seems like a player's death is one of those few events that can add significant, long-term value to a Hall of Famer's card. 2020 has been a wild, unpredictable year in the hobby. Let's hope we don't see any more Hall of Famers pass this year. Thanks for watching, and please leave any thoughts, comments, or questions below.